Welcome to Ask Professor Revel. This is a monthly medical series brought to you by Kadimastem. I'm Margie Haddad. Today we're going to talk about a subject near and dear to my heart. It is football, and Professor Revel, I have to tell you, I'm really excited because when I was growing up, my dad used to take me to the Eagles football games in Philadelphia. And because we lived in Harrisburg, clearly I am a Penn State Nittany Lions fan. How about you? Did you have a love for football growing up?
Well, when I was a 15-year-old, we moved for 1 year for a sabbatical at Yale. My father was working there, and I learned of the Yale football team, the Bulldogs, and we went to games and had shirts and T-shirts and sweatshirts and everything around that. And I remember it as a very exciting time watching football.
It is an exciting time. It's a really great afternoon or evening with the family or with friends. And today we're talking about it because there was a really interesting study in JAMA Neurology linking football, something that you know about very, very well, which is ALS. Can you tell us about the link and what the study said?
Football has been the subject of this study that you're mentioning because there is a large database, and the database has been screened and looked upon, and they've compared professional football players to the general population. And it seems that the risk is higher, especially for those who played longer and were more time on the league. So when there is a dose effect correlation, this strengthens the link because it means that maybe there is a mechanism there. We're not sure what the mechanism is. And some claim that it has to do with head injuries, repetitive head injuries. They do seem to suggest that repetitive head injury are the explanation why there is such an observation that the longer you play on the league and the more time you spend on the field and the more games you participated in has been shown to be linked to higher risk. So all this seems to suggest and support this hypothesis. And therefore, I think we should be cautious, and cautious not only in the interpretation of the data, but also when we play games, perhaps to protect our heads better and prevent such a concussion, or maybe decrease the intensity of the head injuries by better protection.
If you're a football player, or you're the family member of a football player or a friend of a football player, ultimately, what would you recommend in terms of something very proactive to help avoid the head injury that ultimately, perhaps, at least according to this study, could lead to developing ALS?
I will start by explaining that ALS is called a syndrome, not only a disease. And that means that it can present in different ways. And some people with ALS survive for many, many years. About 10% survive for more than 10 years with the disease. It's true that it's a very progressive disease and that people often die of problems within 3 years. But the presentation may be different if you detect it early. And even for our studies at Kadimastem, we prefer to detect the patients at the early stages of the disease. So I think the best advice is to follow your physician's records and go for regular examination. And if you have any suspicion that you may have a problem, go see your physician and complain that there is something wrong. Because early detection of a problem is very, very important for many diseases, but especially for ALS. I recall, Margie, that in our last or before last talk, we spoke about physical condition. And when you enter such a disease in a better physical condition, you have better chances of having a slow progress, a slow deterioration, and you can survive for many years, even with a very bad disease.
I read that the NFL and maybe even some college teams are starting to use some special type of helmet to help the players avoid head injury. What do you think of the special helmets that they're using? Useful, not useful?
So I've read the discussion in that paper, and indeed they talk about different kind of head protection. And it seems that with the years, with the decades that this game has been played, there has been an improvement in those helmets. Now they're using materials such as soft shell and better grasp on the head. And the players do seem to report that they get less head injuries. And if they get hit, then it's less intense. I think that in the future, it will be possible to measure exactly the intensity and the location where those hits are, and perhaps reduce them even more, and then see if we have a decrease in the presentation of the disease in the future follow-up of this data.
Okay, I want to go back to something you said earlier in the conversation, which is get checked regularly. Early warning signs, be aware of them. What are those early warning signs?
So some of them may be very subtle. Maybe you feel weak. Maybe you feel that your power is not as it was before. Maybe you run not as well. Your coordination is not as good, because it does not involve anything with your intellect. It's only motor neurons that are involved. So if you have some difficulty breathing, or your strength is not as much, or your stamina is not as much, I think every person knows himself the best. And if something is wrong, especially with such athletes and such professional players, I think they notice that something is wrong. So maybe some of them are shy about it. Maybe they're afraid that it will damage their career. So I think we should encourage players that health is above everything, and try to be involved and listen to your body.
One last closing thought for those wonderful, wonderful professional athletes out there so that they can stay safe.
So I think ALS is one of the diseases that is enjoying a lot of awareness due to the bucket challenge and other trials, and lots of publication. And I think some of the budget should be focused on trying to protect professional athletes, so that we can encourage our teams and help our players be safe. And if there is a problem, to find it early. And if there is something that we can do to reduce the risk, anything we should certainly try to put our efforts and our budget on this.
Football season's coming up soon. I'll see you out there in the stands cheering on my team while you're cheering on yours.
Okay, and thank you for sharing all this with our audience, and see you next month.
Thanks, Professor Revel. As
Bye-bye.
always, amazing information.
Thank you. Bye-bye.